If you love liberty, declare your independence by signing the Shire Society Declaration at shiresociety.com.
Moderator, and if you have any questions about the Science Center, we'll be happy to answer them. And we thank our hosts here at Star Brewing Company for allowing us to have our educational program here. Science on Tap is part of the worldwide movement of science cafes to bring the public together with scientists and experts to discuss a particular topic. So we're very glad to be able to bring that to the Manchester community. Our topic tonight is cryptocurrencies. And we have a couple of panelists to join us, and I'm going to introduce them. First, we have Vin Armani. He is a philosopher, serial tech entrepreneur, and crypto savage. He is the founder and chief technology officer of CoinText.io, an SMS-based cryptocurrency wallet available in over 40 countries. In addition to being a software developer, author, and speaker, he has made his living as a television star, film producer, art gallerist, pirate radio station operator, DJ, motorcycle courier, and more probably, right? He studied philosophy at Howard University. Join me in welcoming Vin Armani. Also joining us tonight is Chris Rietmann. He's the owner of Route 101 Local Goods in Keene and the executive director of the Bitcoin Embassy of New Hampshire, a program involving consulting, education, and networking opportunities in New England. He has been involved in Bitcoin and blockchain technology since 2013. He is a frequent panel member and speaker at Bitcoin and blockchain conferences and is dedicated to see these technologies expand into our everyday lives. So join me in welcoming Chris Rietmann. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass the mics to these two gentlemen. They're going to tell us a little bit more about their expertise. And then my co-worker Peter Gustafson will take your questions with the mic after they're through.
Thank you, Adele. It was really nice to meet you. My name is Chris Rietmann, and my primary focus right now is Bitcoin Embassy, New Hampshire. I've been involved in Bitcoin and blockchain technology since about 2013, which means to some people I'm very old in the game, and to others it means that I'm a newbie. I saw a great graph on social media, and it basically said, you know, it was showing the bell curve of technology understanding within blockchain, and it starts out here going, I don't know anything. Oh my God, I'm an expert, I know everything. I really don't know anything. Because that's how it is. We're dealing with a technology that is constantly evolving. There were things that came out today that made things that came out yesterday obsolete. And this happens every single day in this industry. And I'm just very happy to be along for the ride and really interested in helping people get into this space, particularly businesses, because I really think where we need to go is this needs to be part of our daily lives. Businesses need to be ready to accept cryptocurrencies, because that changes a lot more than just how we do business. It changes the world.
So, my name is Vin. How many people here have at some point owned cryptocurrencies? I just want to know what it is I'm dealing with. Okay, good. Okay, good. So that means that we get to actually talk at kind of a general level, which I think is actually one of the most interesting spaces to speak at. So I've been involved with Bitcoin for a while. I got my first Bitcoin in 2012. It was late 2012 though, so almost 2013, and I've been developing, starting with the Bitcoin BTC blockchain, developing applications since 2014, and I founded last year a company called CoinText, which is at the moment the only fully SMS-based cryptocurrency wallet. So that means that you can send and receive using just a text message, as I just did with Chris because he hadn't done it before, cryptocurrency. So everybody who does not own cryptocurrency but would like to, I would love for your first experience to be with our service. So, and even those of you who already do, I'll give you guys some Bitcoin Cash, which I'm sure that at some point we'll talk about forks. So it's probably the most well-known fork of Bitcoin. So I'll give anybody who wants some, when we're done, some money, and then the company as well will give you some, and you don't need to download anything, and you can see just how easy it is. So I would love to introduce you guys to that. So I was telling the organizers earlier, and thank you guys so much for having us out. I was telling them that this is kind of an auspicious day to be talking about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, because tomorrow is actually the 10-year anniversary of the first release of Bitcoin software to the public. So it's been 10 years. A lot has happened in 10 years. If you could imagine, I mean, every other form of money that we've had has been around quite a while. Even, as we're using the banking system, that's even though there have been some changes and some new technologies, that's fundamentally a 900-year-old system. Started with the Knights Templar, being able to deposit your gold as you were going to the Crusades as a pilgrim to the Holy Lands, deposit your gold in Europe, and withdraw it at a branch in Jerusalem. So that's 900 years, and Satoshi Nakamoto, the sort of mysterious inventor of Bitcoin, solved some problems that had existed for 900 years, and he solved them with a mixture of computer science, mathematics, game theory, psychology, sociology, economics. So this really is a science project, and it's still very experimental, but it's an experiment that we all get to participate in, because unlike the banking system, nobody can stop you from participating. It belongs to everyone, and it belongs to no one. And that's the first time in a very long time that has been the case with money. So I'm super passionate about this, and as Chris said, the further you dig into it, it's one of the few things I've ran across in my life that's that way. The further you dig, the deeper it goes. And there's a place in it for everybody, technical or not. So it's very, very exciting, and I'm glad to be here, and I can't wait to share more with you guys.
All right. Thanks, guys. So this is the fun part, the crowd participation part. I'll come around with a microphone, and people can ask questions, and we'll just kind of begin a discussion. So we'll start over here.
It might be good to explain how it works first, but can you talk about the downfall of cryptocurrencies, which is how you mine those coins and the value fluctuations and the transaction costs?
Sure.
It seems like it's kind of down.
Well, go a little deeper, because I'm not actually sure that, or maybe we might have different opinions on that. I'm not actually sure that's the downfall. I think that might actually be the key, and I think Satoshi would probably agree with that too.
Yeah, so a lot of people, and there's a lot of focus on two things about cryptocurrency. First of all, that the mining process is very resource intensive, that it takes a lot of energy to mine one block, and oh my God, there is more money going into Bitcoin mining in electrical costs than there are that power some entire countries. Has anybody heard that narrative? Yeah. Right, it's not true. And secondly, the volatility of the price, which is certainly there because it's freely traded. There's no one company that comes out and says this is the price of Bitcoin, because no one owns it. And that's a pretty heady concept, that no one owns Bitcoin. There is no Bitcoin corporation, there's no Bitcoin panel, there's no one, there's just Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. The volatility is kind of online with that of Amazon. If you look at the price variation over time, you're going to see about the same fluctuation in price. Secondly, a good friend of mine, Dan Held, has done a lot of research into the energy consumption aspect of Bitcoin mining and cryptocurrency mining. And another gentleman that he's worked with on another paper, these are peer-reviewed papers, really goes into detail. So he compares it to two things: energy consumption by major banks and central banks, and also into the costs that go into mining gold, which has historically been money, right? He breaks it down to the point where he says the average gold mine uses 17 Caterpillar D4 bulldozers, and it has this many of that, and he breaks it all down. And when you really get past sort of that hype, that idea that this thing just sucks up energy, when you compare it to the branches of Citigroup, and you throw in a little Bank of America for good luck, and you throw in all their data centers, the question about which way is more economical to manage and move our money, the question becomes pretty apparent. But it's a very common narrative that we hear a lot. Vin?
So one of my favorite quotes is from the economist Thomas Sowell, and he says that in economics there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. So Bitcoin has trade-offs as versus the traditional banking system as we know it. And so I think since we're talking at kind of a general level, instead of necessarily talking about how it works, because I think getting into the technical weeds sometimes starts to get a little blurry at a certain point. I think better than that, and it's something that I think most of us will be able to grasp onto in a very strong way, is to talk about why Bitcoin exists. And especially for talking at a Science on Tap event, to say what was the problem that this guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, was trying to solve, that he even went to all of the effort to create this thing, Bitcoin. And so the basic problem, and he lays this out in the Bitcoin white paper, pretty easy to understand. How many people here have ever had to call their bank and have them reverse a fraudulent charge or a charge that they had not? Anybody? Yes? Some hands? Okay, so this is not like some sort of a foreign thing to people. This is something that we go through. And so Satoshi Nakamoto was looking at the banking system as it currently is, and specifically talking about with online payments, which is where a lot of these fraudulent charges will show up. You know, we're always hearing things about, oh, identity thefts, identity thieves, they got a hold of something. And what he said is, okay, so we've got this system, this 900-year-old system, where we have these custodians who are in control of our money and who are in control of the networks. And so they have to settle disputes. Someone's in charge, and they're operating under all of these regulations. They have to settle disputes. And so what that means is that over time, you're going to have merchants, some more than others, but I'm sure even this bar here has a situation where if you talk to their accountant, they'll say, oh yeah, maybe 2%, 3%, we know that that's going to be lost because it's going to be a chargeback. Somebody's going to just say, I didn't charge that, and the merchant's going to be out. Now they've done the service, they've given the good, they're out the money. And he said, well, this is going to equal out to billions, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars per year globally. So how would you solve a problem like that? We've got to create a system where everyone involved can verify, because there's going to be no one in charge. No one's going to be able to say, this transaction is valid or invalid, and I'm going to take it away, I'm going to take the money away. We've got to figure out how to build some system where every single person can interact with each other with no middleman in between. Everybody can verify that what Chris is giving to me is the real deal, not counterfeit. It's got to be electronic. It's got to be instant. How do we do that? That's a very, very difficult problem. And so one of the solutions, and I think that it's probably the best solution, and from a philosophical standpoint, it's a pretty slick solution that he came up with, is you're going to have to start this out with some sort of base of a proof of work. We've got to find something that every single person can verify. And so without going into terrible technical detail, it basically requires that the computers that are involved on the network, that are adding to this ledger, a global, basically, bank ledger, that they have to solve I won't say that it's a difficult math problem, but it's basically a series of dice rolls. And sometimes it's trillions of dice rolls to try to find a number that is valid, and then they have to show it to everybody else. That's the best way to look at it. If you imagine we're all here rolling the dice, it's almost like bingo. We're all here rolling dice, and there's a value of numbers out here that is valid, and we just keep rolling, 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 until you say, oh, I got it, I got one, and then you show everybody, and we say, okay, you won, you get to write into the ledger now. And then we just keep going and going and going. That requires a lot of energy. That requires a lot of energy. But, the trade-off is this. What is the difference in the energy that is lost by not solving that problem? What is the difference in the energy that is lost by a business not being able to start because they weren't able to get approved by a point of sale company or by a bank? What is lost by someone in a third world country or a country where the currency is being devalued, like is happening in Venezuela now? What's lost by those people not being able to participate in a global marketplace? What do you gain? And so it is a trade-off. It is definitely a trade-off. But it is a huge problem that Bitcoin solves, and now we're going to get to see. Now we're going to get to have that competition with the old way, and potentially this new way, and this new idea that this mysterious person came up with, and that is now starting to slowly but surely take over the world. We're going to get to see.
It's great. It's a great point. And one of the things that really gets solved by this, so I was just looking around the room, and I was trying to divide it up into about eights, but let's say that sort of that corner of the bar, you guys don't have bank accounts. Okay, I'm saying that that's about an eighth. About an eighth of the people in this room don't have bank accounts. What does that limit you from doing? Does it limit you from purchasing a house? Does it limit you from being able to be paid by most employers? It's really tough. I mean, you get paid in cash, maybe, if the employer supports that. Can you own a car? Can you own property? Can you afford to have your land saved so you know exactly what is yours? These are all things that philosophically, I think, come into question when we start talking about, is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency worth the money that is expended in making sure that this ledger is absolutely up to date? And for me, it's easy to look around in New Hampshire and say, you guys have choices. You got choices. You could use Bitcoin. You could use cash. You could go get a loan. You could buy gold. You could buy silver. You can do all these things. But 1 out of 8 people in the world don't have that opportunity. They are what we call the unbanked, and their outlook is not good. So even though this may appear expensive, and like I said, there's a number of papers that have been written on the topic, where when we compare it to how much money we expend in our regular US dollar fiat currency-based system, it's not. But to me, that sort of makes it worthwhile.
All right, we're going to get a couple more questions going here. Get this conversation. You're next after. Go ahead here.
Okay. Yeah, you described the mining transactions entering in a ledger, but obviously there are a lot of transactions that don't involve new coins. They involve just the exchange of old coins or parts of coins. And those also have to be entered in the ledger, unless I'm mistaken. So that's a factor that I don't fully understand. And also, there may be 12% of the people in the world don't have a bank account. It's not clear to me that 12% of people care whether they have a bank account or not. In the United States, that would be a serious constraint. I was also in Zambia, and there are always people living in Zambia, and they don't really have much use for money on a general basis. I mean, they like to have it and be able to buy some things. But they're subsistence farmers who are living quite happily out there in the middle of nowhere and having a good life. So I don't buy into the banking is necessary or even currency is necessary.
So on your first point, good, because I didn't explain that. So basically what you're doing every time that you get your dice roll, as it were, and you write into the ledger, you are not just writing into the ledger the new coins that you get. And as a matter of fact, in a couple of decades, nobody's getting any more new coins. So what you're writing in is you're writing in also all of the other transactions that are waiting from everybody else. And so what that reward is, that as you're talking about what's called the block reward, so miners right now, the economics of it is these miners are mining because, kind of like mining gold, you get new coins every time you get that dice roll right. But the economics in the future will be that how these miners will be paid is that there's a small fee attached to every single transaction that goes in. And this is, I mean, this is current, but what this will be their only revenue, is that fee, the sort of aggregate amount of those fees, every time you write into the ledger. So what you write into the ledger, you write a block of transactions into the ledger. That happens about every 10 minutes on Bitcoin, right. And on many Bitcoin derivatives. On others it's a minute, some of them it's 2.5 minutes. It depends on what fork you're dealing with. And then each one of those is dependent on the one before them and the one before them, all the way back to block number 1, and that's called the blockchain. So it's just the same way that your bank ledger, if you go back, the debits and credits are all sort of reliant upon each other, and if you follow them all the way through, you get your ending balance. That's exactly what it is, but it's that for the whole world. So and in terms of the banking the unbanked, I'm actually I'm an advocate of the reverse, which is unbanking the banked, because really what I see as the future for, so my company Cointext, we're in 40 markets right now, 40 countries. Our most recent that we just released into in the last several weeks is Bangladesh and Philippines. And so in those countries, the mobile penetration is pretty good. In Bangladesh, it's like about 40%. In Philippines, I think it's something like 60%. But the smartphone penetration is very low, and many of them don't even have mobile internet going to their phone. And so these are people who are cut out of sort of the revolution in electronic finance and electronic commerce that we all take for granted. And when you've got an international network, those people in Zambia, while they don't have much use for money now, one of the reasons they don't have use for money now is because they don't have anybody to sell their goods to. But if they've got, if you know, our service is not in Zambia, we're in South Africa, but if they're in South Africa and they've got some local good and they're able to get to the post office to send that, we're connected. We're as connected as I am to somebody who's got a full blast point of sale in the Visa network. And so I think that that's really, they don't need the money now, but yes, when they're connected to a global network where they can trade their goods and services to the whole entire world and no one can stop them, then who needs money really changes. So that's something that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency enables.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make sure everybody kind of understands the basics of how transactions work and what everybody's roles are. So let's say you guys all have Bitcoin wallets or Bitcoin Cash wallets, and you're transacting, you're sending money back and forth between yourself. You're paying him for working on your car. You're obviously the auto mechanic here, sir, I'm pointing at you. So you're working on their car and they're paying you in Bitcoin or whatever. Now, what do we do with those transactions? We have to look at those to make sure from a Bitcoin point of view that all the rules were followed. And what that requires is not companies that are dedicated to Bitcoin mining, but it's people like myself who just happen to support the Bitcoin network. We are nodes. We run full nodes on our computers, and it doesn't take much energy or time, but it's just always there running in the background. So all these transactions you see come to me. And what I do is I check to make sure that all the rules are followed. And this is why, quick guess, how many fraudulent transactions have been detected on the Bitcoin network in 10 years? In other words, how many were put out there, but it turns out the person didn't really have the money to send it? Yes, less than 100, more than 100. Which one? Less than, more than? You knew the answer, Ben, come on. 0. Can Jamie Dimon say the same thing? Probably not. So as we do this, the reason we do this, so once I've collected all these good transactions because I've checked every record, then I'm going to pass it off to the miners, and they're going to put those into blocks, and they're going to solve that difficult math problem, and they're going to work really hard at it, and the winner is going to get 12.5 Bitcoins right now. In another couple of years, that's going to be cut in half again. That's called a halving. So it slowly, from an economics point of view, the supply of coins, the increase will slow down. That's a somewhat deflationary coin. But I hope that kind of makes what different people involved in Bitcoin do. Consumers, miners, and full nodes.
All right, we get a few questions in queue here. I'm going to start here.
Your actually last statement is what my question was initially about. So you have said that a number of fraudulent activities with Bitcoin is more than 100 in the last 10 years. I'm in an IT field, not the application developer, but IT infrastructure. And the problem we're seeing very often is ransomware software or just targeted hacking attacks which hold our clients' data ransom, and the payment is almost in 98% of the cases cryptocurrency. Luckily, all our clients have good backups, so they don't have to use it, but there are stories of the companies out there who did not have good backups and actually had to pay for, they had to pay ransomware to get their data back. And obviously that's unknown if you're going to get the data back or not. So how do you see that problem? Is there a way that cryptocurrency in the future is going to solve that problem? Where that's actually, it isn't technically fraudulent activity because, I mean, the crime is actually holding somebody ransom, but the payment is obviously not, I mean, it's not, what I'm saying is that the payment is used for something that is ill-intended. So just the question is like, how do you see that being solved in the future?
Yeah, there's a couple aspects of that. So first of all, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general are very desirable in cases of theft and extortion and things like that. This system where I verify and Vin mines and we make sure that every transaction is exactly correct also makes it absolutely irreversible. So, and that's a good thing. And we can get into the details of that, but as it relates to crime, how many people, well, first of all, Bitcoin transactions are anonymous. Everybody knows that, right? Nobody can know where Bitcoin transactions, who made them, right? Am I right? Am I wrong? See, that's like the third one I've missed tonight. Bitcoin transactions are what I like to call pseudo-anonymous. Means it's not easily, I can't just go to the yellow pages and find I got this Bitcoin address and he's extorting Vin for, you know, $50 million or he's not going to return his laptop to him. There's nothing like that. But you also have people like the head of FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Division of the Department of Treasury, who said, we'd love it if everybody transacted in Bitcoin. Because they have so many more tools to be able to track that money. What currency is used most commonly in illegal activity, fraud, theft, kidnapping? Anybody?
$100 bills.
US dollar bills. It's the most common thing. You want to talk about drug trade, it's US dollar bills. You can go down the list of illegal activities and that's what you'll find. How do you trace a $1 bill or a $20 bill or a $100 bill? With Bitcoin, if I'm conducting this fraud against your customer and I've used this address before for some other reason, that means that some enterprising company out there who works in Bitcoin, what's the word I'm looking for? That's going to slip my mind. But who works in looking at these past transactions and tracking them will find it very easily. And that's
like
a reality.
Forensic analysis kind of.
Thank you. That was the word I was looking for, yes. forensic analysis, and those companies are out there, and they're doing their thing. And like I said, law enforcement loves it.
So yeah, I want to go back to the Thomas Sowell trade-off quote, because you're absolutely right. If someone is a hacker and they want to do this ransomware, then yeah, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, Monero is also becoming popular, which is a much more privacy-centric coin, is perfect for that. And so yeah, we are talking about an asset that is can be relatively anonymous, is pseudonymous, yes. Because you don't have anybody in control of the network, this is something that happens. But there's also another trade-off, not having someone in control of the network, and that is no one can seize funds, my funds, from out of my Bitcoin account. They're cryptographically secure in a way that the computers that exist today simply could run almost until the end of time, and they would never be able to specifically crack and get the private key that would be necessary to take my funds. And if we look back over the last 100 years, we could see that there have been a great many situations where completely innocent people have had their property seized by governments that then took that and did as they wanted. It happened in Nazi Germany, happened in Soviet Russia.
Can I bring up civil asset forfeiture?
Civil asset forfeiture.
Anybody ever heard of that one? Just a quick example, a man who just sold his house, he's actually taking cash from the East Coast to the West Coast to buy his new house. He likes to deal in cash, it's his cash. So he's got, let's say, $60,000 in his car, and he gets pulled over in Iowa by the Iowa State Police. The state police look in there, they say, you have $60,000 in cash in your car, there's no way that's normal, therefore we're seizing your car and we're seizing your cash because it obviously came from illegal activities like drug dealing. And the recourse there is for you to have to sue on behalf of your money, because it
you sue your money, actually.
Yeah, you do. You have to sue your money and prove to the government that this all was done through legal matters. I'd say this rarely happens, but it happens all the time in the United States, sadly.
And I would say that it happens more often than a company is ransomed.
Yeah.
So it's something and that they end up having to pay the ransom. So I would say that these are, again, it's economics and it's trade-offs. And we've got to decide which way we want to go. Do we really trust that the system that we have will stay in our best interest? Or do we feel like maybe, even if we're going to say, I think that it does, perhaps to diversify a little bit and to allow there to be an option where we can have a little more financial sovereignty, and to allow others in the world who maybe do not have the luxury of being in an environment with governments that do respect at least the amount of sovereignty that our government respects. People in Venezuela, people in Zimbabwe who have had their farms and assets seized, and what's about to happen in South Africa again today. People in Turkey, where the lira is being so greatly devalued that people are basically losing their entire life savings because of the activity that the government's having. And so these are the trade-offs.
All right, let's do a couple more questions. Another one up here.
Yes, I'm curious, so I've got a Bitcoin credit card, let's say. How divisible is it? For instance, can I buy a pack of potato chips out of the vending machine, a cup of coffee at the restaurant? In India, the rupees are probably worth less than our pennies,
Right.
And other currencies similar. How does it address that?
So Bitcoin, just speaking of Bitcoin, and a lot of cryptocurrencies are slightly different. Bitcoin is divisible up to 8 decimal points. So basically I figured it out one time. If the price of Bitcoin became $323,000 per Bitcoin, I think that was the number I came up with, then the smallest unit, 0.000001, would be worth 1 penny. So right now, Bitcoin is capable of, and lots of other cryptocurrencies are capable of doing sub-penny transactions left and right. And there's actually a market for that. We're seeing that as Internet of Things developed, as we start to look at microtransactions for various things that cost very little, but some value needs to be transacted.
So that smallest unit is referred to as a Satoshi, so it's 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. So it is technically divisible all the way back to that. Currently, the way that most Bitcoin and Bitcoin derivative software is set, the smallest amount that you can send is 562 Satoshis. So because of fees and all of that. So I'm not sure what that is on BTC at the moment, but it's probably somewhere around 3 cents. I think that's about the smallest unit that you can send, and then the largest unit that you can send is, I mean, it's up to however, I don't know, there's 19 million something Bitcoins out there, so you could send them all if you had them all.
Right.
So that's what, billions.
It depends.
The question was.
The question is, what are the fees?
What are the fees?
So if when we do a transaction, you guys do the transaction. You paid this gentleman to work on your car again. He's getting tired, guys. You got to come up with somebody else to fix your cars. As you do these transactions, if you want the transaction to occur more quickly, I want this transaction, he's going to get angry with me if he doesn't have his money in the next hour, so I'm going to pay a little bit higher fee to make that transaction more appealing to the miners so they will mine that block sooner. So that's what fees are. They are a voluntary way for me to assure that my transactions go through a little quicker. The problem with Bitcoin fees and other cryptocurrencies is that sometimes wallets don't accurately estimate what fees might be, and they artificially inflate them to higher levels, which the miners are more than happy to accept. So there's some algorithms that take place outside of the blockchain that tend to kind of make things wonky every once in a while. And sometimes it's just an event. There was one Bitcoin exchange that moved a whole bunch of Bitcoin from one place to another. And in doing so, they could have done it as one transaction, but they basically said, we're going to just do it, account by account, so we're moving millions of transactions. And the laws of supply and demand, suddenly there's millions of new transactions going on in Bitcoin. The price of the fee goes up in response to that. It's like Uber. It's the same thing. If there are a lot of people looking for a ride in a particular part of town, the prices will go up. Bitcoin responds the same way. But again, a lot of those problems, I feel, are more transient and more challenges than nails in the coffin, if you will.
This is actually a contentious question and has caused a lot of, it is the question that has caused the most turmoil in the Bitcoin community. It's actually the reason for a lot of the schisms. It's a very weird and interesting little community, and if any of you want to get involved in it, it will take up all day, every day of your time. Some of the most interesting people that I've ever met, and it gets pretty interesting. To tell you, I mean, the fees on the BTC, the main network right now, can be anywhere between 1 cent. There are plenty of transactions that go out every day that are a cent. All the way up to multiple dollars, $5, $10, depending on how much somebody wants to pay on it. The weird thing about Bitcoin transaction fees is that they are not based on how much money you're sending, which is very, very different from how we understand like wire fees and whatnot, or like you're taking stuff out of your brokerage account, for instance. It's going to be on a percentage basis. It has nothing to do with that. It's based on the actual data size of your transaction, and what's weird about that is that it's totally possible for a $1 transaction to require a larger fee than a $1 million transaction. It's very strange that way because the network doesn't actually care how much value you're sending. It doesn't really recognize that. It's only looking at the size of the actual transaction that you're sending. And so one of the ways that happens, just at a very high level, if I send you 100 one-penny transactions, the way that Bitcoin looks at this is you now have these inputs, you have 100 inputs. Now if you want to send those over to him, you're going to have 100 inputs and 1 output, so that's going to be that size. If I send you $1, you now have 1 input. If you want to send it to him, you have 1 input and 1 output. So I could have sent you $1 million with 1 input and 1 output. But that $1 with the 100 pennies, just like you could imagine a $100 bill as versus 100 pennies in your hand. The 100 pennies is heavier, you're going to get charged more for that. So it's a little weird how those work. Most wallets have gotten good, but some are still pretty bad at it. But like I say, most transactions, if you've got a pretty good wallet, are going to be relatively low right now.
Yes, and it's not that Bitcoin hasn't had some serious issues with this. So, like a year, are we a year later? Yeah. We saw fees spike for any transaction up to $37 on average. Did they go to 57? It seems like...
Yeah, even for a $1 transaction, you'd be paying 50. So that
kind of rules out
problems.
Yeah, it rules out the cup of coffee, and I'm going to pay with Bitcoin. Yeah, that'll be $1 plus 57.
But that's not the case now, and like I say, one of the cool things about Bitcoin is it's open source software. So if you don't like the rules, you don't like the way that things are going, and you got a bunch of friends, create new software and create a new fork of Bitcoin. And if people want to follow you, you can do that. And so there's dozens of different forks of Bitcoin that all do different things.
Guys, I have a feeling the more we talk, the more questions we have.
Okay. All right.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Thank you. And you're exactly right. I had one question, I now have 6. And it's thanks to you. You brought up a lot of things. But the profit margin. Nobody does anything for nothing. And I can't remember the gentleman's name who started Bitcoin, but...
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Well, good for him. But it must be good for him. So how is he making money off this? How are you making money off this?
Well, as far as Satoshi goes, nobody really knows because in 2014, he sort of dropped off the radar. 2013? No. Dropped off the radar? 2012?
2011.
2011.
Gosh, gone by 2011, yeah.
Yeah. So Satoshi wrote the white paper. He wrote the design of Bitcoin. He put it out there. It's 9 pages long. It's not a difficult read. There's some math in it that's a little challenging, but you can understand the concepts, and it's pretty much stayed sort of like what he wrote out. Different paths have taken different directions. When Satoshi first released his software, somebody had to put it into use, so he loaded it onto his computer, whoever he is, and whatever kind of computer.
Or she. Or they.
And started writing the software and processing transactions and going for a block reward. So I think the Satoshi wallets, and we know what those are worth somewhere around $5 billion ballpark. Don't quote me on that. Since 2011, when Satoshi sort of disappeared and just said, you know, I'm hanging it up, I'm going to work on some other things for a while, those wallets haven't been touched. Now, I don't.
How do we know that? It's a public ledger, so we can see all of the addresses. When there are some things that people have associated that they say it might be Satoshi. So basically, 10 years ago, as I say, the software was released, but he had already been mining. So you can go back and see all of those addresses if you go back 10 years ago, and nothing has happened, nothing has moved. There are some, after people started mining, we don't know exactly which ones are Satoshis, but every once in a while some money will move And people will say, was that a Satoshi address?
What if
What's
he
that?
died? What if he died? What happens to the money?
Well, I think I know who Satoshi was. And I've written pretty extensively.
You heard it here, folks.
Well, no, I mean, Forbes did a little thing on a recent article that I wrote about it. So I think that it was the person who acknowledged that they were the second person involved, a cryptographer by the name of Hal Finney.
Yeah.
And he also received the first Bitcoin transaction, and he is dead. He actually, there's some weird timing. It's like I say, Bitcoin's got a great story, but there's some weird timing that right around the time that Satoshi disappeared, a couple months after Bitcoin had come out, he was diagnosed with ALS, so Lou Gehrig's syndrome. And right around the time that Satoshi disappeared and stopped writing, he had basically started to become paralyzed. And by the end, he was obviously unable to move. He was still actually coding, writing software with his eyes, the same way as Stephen Hawking. There's a great Forbes article, his name is Hal Finney, if you just look up Satoshi Was My Neighbor, a great old Forbes article from just before he died that tells sort of the story. It's an amazing story. But he is dead. He's cryogenically frozen, which is interesting. He chose to cryogenically freeze himself as though maybe he might be incredibly wealthy in the future and be able to be woken up and, it may say a little something, but
what happens to the money?
That's a great question, because
if he handed over his private keys to his children could spend it now.
But if he didn't?
Well, let's talk just for a second about how that works, because estate planning comes into the conversation of cryptocurrency. How do I pass on my legacy to my children? So if I have my wallet, this is my public wallet, this is the wallet I carry around all the time. Yeah, I know. But let's just say that this was one of those wallets that had a little latch that came over the top and there was a key that I had to put the key into it before I could open it. That's sort of how cryptocurrency works. Every wallet is a public key pair. So if anybody's loosely familiar with public key cryptography, that means that there's a public key that is easy to share and anybody can see it, and there's a private key that is the only way to unlock what's in that message, if it's an email or if it's cryptocurrency in a cryptocurrency wallet. So we are very big on religiously guarding our private keys. For some people that means I'm going to write down my private key, or I'm going to put a QR code in my fireproof safe and I'm going to keep it at home. For some people, they may feel that keeping it in a safety deposit box is right. Or there's some people that will contract with a company in Switzerland which maintains old Soviet era undersea bomb, or under mountain bomb shelters with no electricity flowing to them, no electromagnetic radiation that goes there. And for fees of millions of dollars, they will protect billions of dollars in cryptocurrency. So it really depends on your scale. But that's the big thing. There is the public key, there is the private key. Always protect your private key.
So anybody that has your private key, or anybody that has the private key associated with an address, can spend that money. So look at it like you would look at cash, like you would look at a bearer bond, and the private key can be written down, as Chris said, on a piece of paper.
Or put in a will.
Or put in a will. Well, you would probably not want to write the private key into the will itself, right? You would, well, because then the attorney, if they could see your private key, you just put, I don't know, if you would like to put all the cash in your attorney's hand, then yes.
Maybe it's a trustworthy attorney.
That's fine.
I trust my attorney.
Yeah. If you've got an attorney, then you can trust I need his card.
But that's a lot of this question of like, how do we protect our assets through generations? And cryptocurrency throws in some real quirks to that. But it really is. It comes down to, how do I come up with a system that protects my private keys? And for some people, engraved metal is a real popular item too, where they will buy a kit that will let you quickly and easily engrave your private key onto a piece of titanium or something like that, that can then be placed somewhere so you don't lose it. Now, it's one thing if it just gets lost, or excuse me, if it gets destroyed or something like that. More commonly, people lose their private keys. And I can't remember what the estimate was, somewhere around 4 million Bitcoin. 4 million Bitcoin at about $4,000 today per Bitcoin are just lost. They're considered orphaned because people have opened up a cryptocurrency wallet or loaded it onto their phone, they put some Bitcoin on there, and for whatever reason, they just lost it.
Forgot their password.
Yeah, forgot their password, just something that simple.
Yeah, I bought my first Bitcoins at $15 and I was giving them to everybody, and I think just about everybody that I gave them to, and a whole lot of the ones that I had purchased, I have absolutely no idea where those went. It went to 1,000 about 9 months later after so I bought my first in December of 2012, and in by November of 2013 it was at 1,000, so from 15 to 1,000. So you can imagine that week was pretty crazy for me trying to run around and find them. I found some, but not all of them. So that happened to a lot of, the people who got in at $1, they were giving them away. So, and now it's at 3, and at the all-time high, 3,000, at the all-time high it was 20,000. So some people made a killing and some people lost.
All right, more questions here. Here we go.
Hi. I'm a person that still likes to read a newspaper, got the ink on my fingers. So, first of all, if you can, how do you define cryptocurrency, hopefully in 25 words or less? And secondly, I don't understand how Bitcoin increases or decreases in value, given that I'm making a transaction to pay or buy something. Why would that increase or decrease the value of a Bitcoin because I made a transaction? I mean, what is changing the value of that Bitcoin?
Sure. So I'm going to take a stab at the 25-word challenge.
All right.
This is a tough one.
10 words in.
I know. This is why I'm horrible at these things. But when we talk about, what I'm going to talk about applies to lots of different cryptocurrencies. I don't want people to think about this as just Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash, Dash, there's all sorts of them out there. But cryptocurrencies are both an asset and a payment network.
And stop.
Yeah, I think I could stop right there. So really it is two things. First of all, it is a completely unique asset. A Bitcoin was created out of a specific block and it cannot be counterfeited. All the computers in the world chugging away, and we'll find out when we get quantum computers whether they can do it, but all likelihood is that we are going to be developing quantum resistant variations of Bitcoin. So it's completely unique. It is an asset. There are only going to be 21 million of these ever produced, which gives it scarcity. In economics, scarcity is considered a critical, what's the word I'm looking for?
Property? Asset?
Thank you.
Only 21 million.
That's a good question, but I don't know if we can really answer that. There's debate as to how that number came out. But it has scarcity, and when things are scarce, they tend to increase in value. And as the life of Bitcoin continues, as we believe it will, we expect that there to be growing demand for this very scarce and uncounterfeitable coin. People are losing faith in fiat currencies. They're losing faith in government currencies. It's gotten to the point right now where central banks, which deal with fiat currencies, are going out and purchasing gold. They are getting back into what one would term hard money, money that is more trustworthy. So I see a very bright future, and it simply rises and falls based on supply and demand. One of the things that will make that happen is if lots of people start to transact for cryptocurrencies.
Right.
So yeah, it's money secured with cryptography. I think that's just the best way of saying it. There's all different kinds of it, but it's when you have something that's money, and then you have cryptography involved, that's how you verify. So it's these codes that, we're talking back to Turing in World War II. That was You know, breaking the Enigma code. That was when all of this started, and a lot of these actual algorithms were generated out of they're the children of that. In terms of why it increases in value, as Chris said, when there's more demand for it, the supply is limited. When there's more demand, the price goes up. There's exchanges. There's all kinds of exchanges. So it's the same reason that the prices of currencies change, like on the foreign exchange market, or stocks or bonds, pretty much any asset out there. But you know, the price of the euro as versus the dollar fluctuates on a day-to-day basis because sometimes people want more euros than dollars and vice versa. So the same thing is true with Bitcoin, with just a lot more volatility. So it's just the up and down movements are a lot more.
More questions? Here we go.
Thank you. So I understand that there are trade-offs, right? But I'm going to ask you about a couple of the trade-offs. One, it's highly dependent on technology. And like you said, it's not a hard money, right? So if there is a mistake or something introduced into the blockchain that has corruption, and data can be corrupted in many ways, right? Then it perpetuates. So, you know, have you seen evidence of that, or do you think that
So this is an absolutely great question, and it goes to what Satoshi developed is called, to answer this question and to prevent that from happening, the system is called Nakamoto consensus. And so it's basically based on what Chris was talking about, is that what you want to have is you want to have a whole lot of people, all nodes, computers, all looking at the same thing. And so the way that this works is that you actually can't, because all of us are independent. So again, if we're all sitting here and we're all sort of checking the same thing, you may try to introduce something into the network that is fraudulent. But you're there by yourself. The rest of us are all just trying to do our own thing, and we're certainly not going to want to introduce your thing specifically. When you want to, so you broadcast both transactions that are coming to you, and also if you find a block, you're broadcasting that out to everyone else on the network, and everyone else is checking it and broadcasting again. So it's relaying and relaying. And if at any one of those points somebody says, oh, that's invalid, it's dropped. And so basically what happens is, and this is what Satoshi figured out, is so long as honest nodes, so people who are just doing their normal thing, going through and not trying to introduce anything weird into the blockchain, not trying to double spend people's transactions, which basically means that to try to pretend like they're spending and then take it back, reverse the transaction. So long as the majority of the total computing power is controlled by honest, so 51%. So long as 51% of the network is not trying to do anything bad, the system is secure, completely secure.
And there is a word for what you're describing, and it's a phrase. It's the Byzantine generals problem. Has anyone ever heard of that? Anybody with a math background or crypto background? The Byzantine generals problem or dilemma is there's this city right here, and this is my general, and this is my general, and this is my general. And I know that I can't trust one of these guys, but I don't know which one I can't trust. And I know that one of these guys is always going to lie. So how do I arrive at consensus? The idea, if you introduce the correct incentives, and behind Bitcoin there are also incentives to encourage and reward you to be honest, and to punish you if you choose to be dishonest. So between all those concepts, I'm taking credit for Satoshi stuff. Satoshi solved this question of the Byzantine general's dilemma. How do we ensure that everybody works off of an honest set of books? I hope that helps.
More questions?
You mentioned at the beginning that there's no one controlling Bitcoin. So who takes the fees?
That's a good question. The fees go to the miners right now. And that's going to be eventually the sole source of income for Bitcoin miners. Not the validators? The validators, we really volunteer. You know, we do that because we believe in it, or that we're running a version of software which functions just like a regular Bitcoin wallet. I can send from it, I can receive from it, but in the background it's also doing this validation.
Well, and so my business also acts as a validator, which is the case with most businesses, whether it's exchanges, other applications. I think over time, I think most of the validation is probably going to be done by businesses, but we're not doing that out of the goodness of our heart. We have a node that is heavily and highly connected onto the network, and every Bitcoin node is open. You can close it off, but in general, you want to be highly connected because that gives you the best look at the network, which means that anyone can broadcast transactions to our node if they have our node's address. And so we've left that open because we need it, because you have to have that node to make a direct communication with the blockchain. And so whether it's an exchange, whether it's a wallet application, whether it's some other, there are lots of different types of applications. There are Twitter clones that are up there. Somebody just launched a Patreon sort of clone. There's YouTube clones. So if you would imagine that all of these major businesses, let's say a Facebook, a YouTube, whatever, those would be the people within this ecosystem if their backbone was, if they were using cryptocurrency nodes, those would be the people whose infrastructure you would be able to use to send your transactions. And they would leave that infrastructure up because they need it in order to operate their business. So it's a really, as Chris said, it's all about incentives in this, that when the incentives are laid out right, everybody just doing what's best for them ends up working out for everybody else. So it's really cool that.
More questions? More questions, go ahead.
All right, I have a couple of questions, kind of from the practical end of it, like if I'm using this cryptocurrency. I'm wondering about like how widely accepted is it? Like how often would I need to convert it back to US currency or something like that? And whether or not it would be, I guess, like something that could be taxed by either taking it out, or could it be taxed like with sales tax, even if I bought with cryptocurrency online or something, could it be taxed in some way?
Yeah, so those are great questions. We're working very hard, and I say we, people within the crypto community, trying to get it to be more widespread in terms of businesses. So what Bitcoin Embassy New Hampshire does is offers education in two directions. First of all, to consumers so that they understand cryptocurrency. We offer free classes. You can come up, take one of our classes, and we'll do our best to dumb this stuff down and make it very simple for people to understand. The second thing we do is we work with businesses because we want more penetration. I want to have more places I can go and spend Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Here's a fun fact. 2 cities that have the most accepting cryptocurrencies per capita in the world, it's always a fight. It's always one of us. It's either Keene or Portsmouth, New Hampshire, over San Francisco, over New York, over any place in Silicon Valley. You are in a hotbed of crypto activity, and we work very hard to do that. I love the fact that in Keene, New Hampshire, this is ridiculous, I just got a tooth pulled by a dentist who accepts Bitcoin. It wasn't great that I got my tooth pulled, but it was great that he accepts Bitcoin.
Did you have enough Bitcoin to pay for it?
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of cool. I can get my car work done. I can go to a half dozen restaurants. Yes, yes, see, there. He's going to have a thriving business after this. Yeah, there we go. So that's the first thing. We get taxed. That depends on the business and like that. Most, you know, if you're buying things online, odds are very good that they're going to follow all the rules. For me, as a business point of view, for Route 101 local goods, which is another thing I do, we treat it as cash transactions. So we don't try to make it any more complicated than that. We accept it, we consider it cash. If I need to sell it to pay the bills and sell my Bitcoin and get US dollars back, I can go to a variety of exchanges online and sell it there.
Cool.
New Hampshire also has a lot of Bitcoin ATMs, both one-way and two-way. What do they call it? Vending machines. I'm sorry. They like to call them vending machines. But yeah, where you can go put in US dollars and have Bitcoin come out the other end, and vice versa. In terms of the taxes,
What comes out?
huh?
What comes out?
Cash? U.S. dollars?
You put in U.S. dollars.
No, Bitcoin. Bitcoin. Well, nothing comes out, right? It's sent to your address. It's sent to your address.
I know.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. A receipt comes out. A receipt comes out. In terms of the taxing, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Well, I'll say Bitcoin specifically, and not get myself into hot water there, because there are some certain tokens that are being considered as securities, and that's a whole other thing. But we'll talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's not considered currency. That's only by U.S. law. That's only if it's denominated in by a foreign country, so foreign currency or U.S. dollars. It's basic, but it is still taxed with capital gains taxes. So you're supposed to pay capital gains taxes on your Bitcoin. A lot of people are not doing that. I'm just going to say, I'm not going to advise that you don't, but as Chris says, most businesses are treating it as sort of cash. I think a lot of people approach it that way. I don't know that the IRS is anywhere near being able to spend the money on the forensic analysis to really sort of start trying to make sure that people are following their capital gains tax. But yes, legally you are supposed to be paying capital gains taxes on Bitcoin appreciation. So that means that if the Bitcoin goes up in price from when you got it and then you trade it out to US dollars, you're supposed to pay.
Or the vice versa.
Or vice versa. You could have capital losses, right? You could have capital losses too. So it's not just capital gains; could be capital losses as well.
So let's walk through how silly that idea is. Okay, I sell you $20 in Bitcoin, and you buy something at your bodega, you buy something at the grocery store, you buy a beer here, you do that. But right before tax time, the price of your Bitcoin expended. So now you have to literally keep receipts from each one of those transactions, so you could show the price at that particular date of when you expended that money. Is that in any way realistic?
Yeah, we take like a penny or 2 penny fees per transaction. We actually have a regime with our company where literally every penny fee, we've got it all tracked on what the price was at a given time. So it's pretty ridiculous. There are a lot of moves to start trying to change those laws and to make exemptions, below, I think it's $600, right?
The first one.
Yeah, so those things are trying to change. New Hampshire is a place that statewide is really trying to do good things in terms of making the laws a lot easier. It's one of the best states for that. That's why I've only been here since last April. It's why we brought our company here. So yeah, it again helps the economy, brings companies here. I really think that, as Chris said, there's so much adoption here as versus other places that this could be a Silicon Valley or a Wall Street of cryptocurrency very easily. It's going to be somewhere, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be New Hampshire. So,
cool. More questions?
This is a simple one, but I also want to throw something out there really quick. You quickly talked about private and public keys, but I think that might be confusing for non-techies. So basically, you have one number that is your number you don't want to share. That's like how you withdraw money, or you can take money out of that. But then you have a public key which you want to give to people because then they can put money on that code, which then puts it into your account. I think that's important.
Very, very good. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the question is, though, there's a hole in the system that I think has not really been talked about too much, like Mt. Gox and the idea of having a central exchange where you don't really own Bitcoin, you own the idea that the company has Bitcoin and you have a share. Sorry, I'm talking fast.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point.
You can take all of that away right away. The government can come in and take that money.
Well, this is the issue with having a custodian, right? So there's this weird situation. What he's talking about with most of the exchanges, as we were saying, is that most of the exchanges are they're basically holding your money, and when you make trades, so trading these different cryptocurrencies, you're basically trading markers essentially casino chips, you could say. You're not really making trades on the Bitcoin blockchain. And so are you saying that that's not the case?
Don't hold your money in exchanges.
Yes. Well, okay. Well, you may need the exchange to actually make a trade.
Yeah.
But yes, and some of them are probably going to be fine forever, and some of them will probably make good, but the best way, of course, is to remove your money from the property of a custodian, because that was the whole problem that Satoshi was trying to solve in the first place. So if you want your money in the hands of a custodian, you should probably just leave your money in an FDIC-insured bank.
Right. And this idea that he came up with was that who do you trust more than anyone else with your money? This most important thing in life. Who do you trust more than yourself? No one. So why should we trust? Why should
for better or worse?
Right. For using money, why does the issue of trust become
Why should we
important?
trust an electronic network that can be cyber attacked? I
I
mean, it'd be wiped out.
It could be.
It can't be. It can't be.
We're screwed if it's all wiped out.
You could, but that would take literally a global EMP event,
Exactly.
and it would have to wipe out every satellite that has a copy of the
Yeah,
blockchain.
so it wouldn't take a global. It would take this kind.
Well, no, actually the way that Bitcoin works is this. If there is one copy of the ledger, the blockchain, one, sitting on a disk somewhere, the entire network can be reconstituted from
if
that.
Anybody has internet access.
Right. So here's the deal. If we're in a, I'll tell you what. If we're in a situation where no one in this country has internet access,
We're screwed anyway.
considering what runs on the internet right now, the last thing I'm gonna be worried about is Bitcoin. I'm gonna be worried about ammunition, toilet paper, and clean water, because that's what I'm gonna need.
But not in that order.
Right.
I think probably in that order, yeah, because I figured with the ammunition I could get the other two.
And more questions. Who?
I heard you guys say that probably one of the two most popular places for Bitcoin is Keene and Portsmouth. But a while back I heard that the South Koreans were the largest users of Bitcoin. I was just curious if you could elaborate on the general demographic that uses it, you know, some of the countries where it's probably had the most penetration, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I do a lot of face-to-face with people. So first of all, I run a small local goods shop in Keene. So I'm face-to-face with regular customers, people just like yourselves, every day. Secondly, I also have a cryptocurrency vending machine in there where you can come into our shop and you can purchase Bitcoin or Dash. We offer two different cryptocurrencies. So I see people that are already focused on it, and I have lots of conversations, because people walk into our store and they see there's a sign that says 5% off if you pay with Bitcoin. Well, what do you mean? I just pay with Bitcoin and I get 5% off everything I buy? Yeah, that's the deal, because I value Bitcoin more than I value US dollars. I see more of an upside there. So to me, that's worth the deal. The type of people, it runs the board. It's everywhere from the young kids, the millennials that you would absolutely expect to be involved in cryptocurrency, but we also have the silver bugs. I describe the silver bugs as those guys who are in their 60s and 70s, and they've been buying and collecting silver, and they've just been waiting for the price to go back up, and it hasn't. So those guys, even though they're very conscious of EMPs, they're very concerned about that sort of thing. They're also concerned that, you know, they feel that the silver markets are being manipulated in such a way that they're not getting any return. So, and we've got the grandmas and we've got everybody else. It's cross-generational.
So internationally, because this is obviously research that my company, being in 40 different countries, that we've done quite a bit. Actually, internationally, the company with the most number of people who have owned cryptocurrency at some point, the highest percentage, is actually Turkey. It's about 18%. Venezuela is also very high. It seems to be that those countries that have Argentina is also very high. Those countries that have had the most recent sort of monetary issues with their fiat currency, with their national currency, the people have swarmed to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So I think that we see, it's the first block, what's called the Genesis block of Bitcoin, block number 0, that started it all. There's a little message in there. It was January 3rd, 2009, and there's a little message that Satoshi wrote in there that is a headline from the Times, and it says, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. So from the beginning, the thought was that perhaps this could save people in the next downturn, the next financial crisis. And so it looks like that's actually coming true all on its own organically, that these countries that are having these financial problems, that people are actually, they're going and trying cryptocurrency. And I think that could be where the real groundswell happens. And if it does, I think that's going to be a real financial boon for those people.
Vin, what's the name of your company currently?
Cointext. Cointext.io is the...
Cointext.
Cointext, yes, .io.
All right, one more question and we're going to wrap up.
You mentioned Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Is there a requirement, a need that there be just one at some point? You said there's a limit to the number of Bitcoins, but does this thing just live on in different lives forever, or what happens?
It's one of those things that I hate to fall back on this, but I think the market is going to solve. There are lots of options out there. Somewhere between 1,700 and 2,500, I seem to be thinking, cryptocurrencies that are listed on most things that list cryptocurrencies and tokens, because there's a whole other thing that doesn't really, it's crypto.
That's a whole other night. That's a whole other night.
Yeah. Suffice to say that blockchain-based technologies also do things other than act as money, and there's lots of tokens that represent different things. So I think the market will decide, and it's interesting for those of us who are in it to, look at things like average transactions per day and see if different cryptocurrencies are growing or if they're falling out of favor. That's going to be the big thing. I suspect there's one out there called Dash. Dash is it's a top 10. I think it's a top 10 in terms of market capitalization, crypto. So that's
close. It's close.
Yeah, 10 to 15, say somewhere in there. But it's definitely got some traction, and it's got some people interested, and hey, maybe that's one of those things that catches on. But I go out and I compare Bitcoin to Dash in terms of daily transactions, and Dash looks like it's dead in comparison. It's flatlined. I mean, there's just nothing going on there. Now, if I zoom in, there is a little bit of activity going on. But if I go to Keene, New Hampshire, or if I go to Portsmouth for that matter, I go into any place that accepts cryptocurrency, they're going to say, do you want to pay with Bitcoin or do you want to pay with Dash? So there may be a role for localized favorites. You know what I mean? Some of these currencies may take on the Armenian market, and they may be very popular there. That's okay with me. I want people to have an alternative in the money that they use. I don't want to have people forced into using the dinero in Venezuela, and what you got paid in yesterday has lost half its value because you didn't spend it before tomorrow. That means you have half as much food that you can afford to buy for your family. That's horrific, and that's going on today. I don't want that to happen anymore. I want there to be alternatives. I want to have a choice.
Okay, usually at this point we ask you if there's something we forgot to ask. That's always my question, but I get another question today. I read in the paper, I do read paper with ink, yes, sometimes. I read in the newspaper that Walmart is requiring blockchain to track its produce. Can you talk about the other uses for the technology, and or if there was anything else that we forgot to ask you that you want to tell us?
So this is kind of contentious, but there are those of us who believe that there is no other use for a blockchain and blockchain technology. I'm one of these people, besides what we call solving the double spend problem. And so that this technology is basically a database. It's a ledger. It's a record of transactions. But what it's specifically for and what Satoshi created it for, and its reason, its why for existing, is because there's no central party in charge. If there's a central party in charge, there are some other very, very fast, very robust databases that are much, much better for being able to track products. But when there are two people who don't trust each other and they want to transact value, whether that's money, stocks, bonds, information, title for property, and we don't trust each other, we don't need to trust each other, we can allow the blockchain to do its work. That's really what it's for. I think what we're going to end up seeing, this is just my prediction, is that a lot of these big companies have been sold on blockchain technology by consultants and by other companies. And the word sounds great, and there's a lot of hype right now, and very few people understand it, and I think that what they're going to see is that it's a very slow database.
That's exactly it. It is one of the, let me state this for the record, Bitcoin's blockchain is one of the least efficient databases ever designed by man. It really is.
On purpose.
On purpose.
On purpose.
All that slowness, all those extra cycles we have to go through, make it the most secure database. That it is impossible to not, it's impossible to forge records. What Walmart and a lot of people, especially when they're talking about supply chains and foods, wants to see is an immutable record that goes all the way from farm to table. So this is, I kind of get where they're going, but I can't help but think it's going to fail. The idea is if there is an immutable record that shows that Adele's very organic farm produced this tomato, and I follow it through the chain to warehouse, and I know it was not contaminated, and finally I got it from my auto mechanic. He gave me the tomato. That I can track through that whole thing that it actually came from Adele. That's sort of the goal that a lot of these companies have. To Vin's point, the question is do you really need to do that on a blockchain? And anybody ever see the TV show Portlandia? There was an episode like in the first season where they owned a little shop and they just said, just stick a bird on it. So it was like they were taking everyday objects and getting the rubber stamp and putting a bird on it, and that gave it value. The word blockchain is rapidly approaching the put a bird on it value in corporate America.
All right, please join me in thanking Vin and Chris for joining us.
And again, if anybody would like some cryptocurrency, I would happily give you some and show off my company, and then you'll do a little command on there and my company will even give you some more, and then you can spread it around to your friends. So if anybody wants to do that, just come talk to me afterwards.
It's free money.
It won't be much, but it'll be free.
It won't be a lot. Thank you.
All right. So next month, we're going to be back to the first Tuesdays, because it's not a holiday like January 1st was, so back to February 5th. We're going to be discussing mental health, what's actually...
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.